Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends. Another patch brings another survival and I have my usual showcase video. The survival starts shortly after the patch releases, so you don't get as much prep time as usual, but hopefully the tips and insights here help you to get a good score. The main thing to point out is that for the first time ever, machines of war are usable in survival. As usual, a quick shout out to FMG who has been invaluable in putting this together. His referral code is on screen as a thank you. The protagonist for this event is the new Votann character, Vynn. I've done an entire showcase on the guy already, but he is a mechanic that brings along an army of repair bots to battle. The event starts on February 8th and runs for a week until February 14th. You start with 2 tokens, and the token refresh rate is 12 hours. Therefore, over the 7 days, you will have 15 tokens as a free-to-play player. You will face the Orcs, and you can bring Ultramarines, Adeptus Sororitas, Astra Militarum, Adeptus Mechanicus, and Adeptus Custodes as allies. Much like the Custodes survival last year, you will also get a power-up to summon a maxed version of Uthar, bringing your total playable characters to 6 when he joins your ranks. I have to admit I really like this aspect of survivals. I think it is a fun and free way for players to play with new characters before they are released, which gives them an idea of whether or not they might want to invest in the characters beforehand. Like the Red Gobbo survival event over Christmas, the reward character is different to the protagonist character. That is to say, although we play as Vynn, the chest rewards contain Tangita shards. I have to admit it struck me as odd that this is the direction Snowprint chose to go. I would have preferred a newer character to put into survival as the reward. However, I suppose the aim is to help newer players obtain one of the key characters on the AdMech team. However, as I'll touch on later this month, I think the mech team is falling away. One of the bigger appeals for this survival is the Blade of the Ancestors power-up. When you collect it, Uthar will drop onto the battlefield for you to command alongside your 5 starter characters. The second new feature is the possibility of using machines of war for the deployable factions. That means for this survival, you can add the Exorcist, Galatian, or Malleus machines. I kind of like it. It adds another layer to gameplay and gives you another place to use your toys. However, the drawback around the machines is that you're realistically only using them for their secondary abilities, since munitions are scarce and valuable. It's just my gut feeling, but it feels a little bit like the survival difficulty scaling has been done by taking machines into account, so if you don't have one of the machines leveled, you might struggle slightly more than usual. I'm scrolling through the enemies and power-ups here, but don't worry if you can't catch it all. I have a summary slide later. We have seen all of these units before as recently as the last survival for the Red Gobbo. For the sake of newer players, I have provided a brief description of each. The main highlight here is the large squig. They have a 3-hit attack and they have a chain of bouncing when attacked, which can move the units around it. They're quite tanky for their rarity and they do not suffer from battle fatigue. You just need to be mindful of that bounce which can disrupt your summons and positioning. Before we move on to the map, the key waves to defeat for this mode are Wave 6 for 5 epic books, Wave 11 for 3 legendary books, and Wave 13 for a mythic book. The mythic waves are quite hard, and once more, Wave 18 has 12 giant squigs with unreasonable stats. This is the map we play on. Enemies enter from these spawn points marked with yellow hexagons. These red spawn point icons in the middle represent your starting position for your characters. Although the height differences are easier to read in the tile set, I've taken the liberty of marking the map by elevation. The higher the number, the higher the elevation. Here on this picture, I've also marked the points where the power-ups tend to appear. This is quite a hard map for the player. Like in the case of Trajan's survival, the center of the map has lower ground, so either you split your forces north and south and risk a wave that comes strongly on the edge you have less defended, or you stay in the middle and get shot from high ground. The size of the map doesn't make it easier to reach the power-ups, nor to clean up enemies that might stay in the corners. Before we get into the characters you can choose, let's talk a little bit about the protagonists. Vynn is our primary protagonist for this survival. In order to be useful, he really needs you to bring a mechanical character to create his army of summoned repair bots. Without the ecogs, he is very underwhelming, only having a melee attack and going down to move 2 once he uses his active. If you bring a mechanical ally, all you'll want to do with Vynn is follow around said ally, repairing them every turn to get a steady stream of summons. It's a double-edged sword. You kind of waste the enhanced stats from the missions, but his summons are great distraction to the enemies. Uthar is serviceable but unexciting. He cannot kill much on his own without power-ups and has a low move speed. The offensive half of his aura is very unimpressive when your enemies have relatively low armor, as the orcs do. I'm not labouring either character since I have detailed showcases on both, with links in the video description in case you want to check them out. When it comes to the tier list, there is nuance to the recommendations. There are several categories of players when it comes to survival. First, we have the players that just want to be able to get the books. Then we have the players that try to clear as many waves as possible, but do not necessarily try out-of-the-box strategies to beat the last wave. Then we have the very, very few that actually make a dent or even clear said last wave. In this tier list, I will mainly cater to the first two groups, trying to get you the books and helping you get far. I'm not going to talk about niche strategies that involve turtling and whittling down the final wave. As a reminder, the traits that make a character good in survival are repeatable summons, being able to kill more than one enemy per turn, or being very resilient or having self-healing. Characters that can summon only once with their active ability are excellent candidates to pick up the ability refresh power-up. I cannot stress how hard this survival is if you don't have a great deal of summons on the field. I would recommend that you run either Bellator, Dreer, Yarrick, or Creed to make use of those power-ups. Now the main course. The tier list and recommendations for this event. Here is the snapshot overview. I'll leave it on screen for a bit to digest before talking through some of the choices. In the greater good category, we have Bellator, Dreer, Morven, Tan, Actus, and Carrion. Bellator is an all-star as usual. Gravis armor makes him very tanky, and with 6 hits, he carries a damage power-up like nobody else. Flying and high mobility means that you can have him exactly where you need him, and he makes the best summons for this event. You should aim to get as many waves of Inceptors as possible. Without a damage power-up, he will probably need help from Calgar or another buffer to clear tougher enemies. Dreer can act as a Bellator substitute, creating waves of summons with the ability refresh power-ups. If you get defensive power-ups on him, he is quite tanky, but otherwise his low armor can make him fairly vulnerable. If you have him at Mythic and have managed to snatch his relic, he will be incredibly tanky every time he charges on the last few waves. I think that very few people, however, will be able to benefit from this. Morven is a character that is quite good on paper. She has a repeatable area of effect attack, and Act of Faith makes sure that those attacks are lethal. I recommend her because she requires a mechanic to make sure she stays healthy. This time around though, you have a repairer that wants to do nothing else but repair every turn, so it's great to have another source of area of effect damage. Tangita plus Actus is a duo that also works great with Vynn, providing repeatable summons that act as distractions. The damage output is not so great, so you might want some power-ups on Tangita. Carrion's just a great character that a lot of people will have leveled for his raid utility. His area of effect attack is really appealing. The one downside to Carrion though is you'll probably need to bring a healer like Isabella or Incisus. In the good tier, we have just Isabella and Yarrick as characters alongside the 2 machines of war. Isabella here is lower than usual. This survival incentivizes you to run a mechanical-based team, so Isabella's passive heal is less valuable. Still, she's a fairly decent healer who can bring a squaddy back from the dead, so I've left her in this tier. Yarrick is another decent choice for a character that can use the ability refresh power-ups. He combines especially well with the Malleus rocket launcher, giving those summoned Cadians a bit of extra damage and making sure they cannot flee, as the first one who does gets executed. I've had to include the machines of war in this tier list, and speaking of the Malleus, if you have the secondary ability at a high level, the machine is excellent, killing 1 enemy per turn and flooding the board with summons. Even at relatively low levels, just giving you a warm body to soak shots every turn is really valuable. If you had the secondary leveled, the Exorcist is another reasonable choice. It can clear up to 4 enemies per turn, but it does take a good amount of practice in terms of anticipating where the enemy might move. It's not too hard to hit 2 enemies per turn, but from my own playing circles, not many people will have had the Exorcist leveled. Titus is serviceable since he tends to have grots or squigs in melee to attack. He's also therefore able to reuse his active as an area of effect ability. Titus can revive himself fairly easily, and there is an argument to move him up 1 tier, but I preferred the summon-heavy compositions for this event. Calgar can serve as a focal point to give your characters and summons enough of a buff that they can kill enemies, but again it's hard to find space for him in the team. Again, I favoured the summoners. Continuing with the Ultramarines, Galatian is the worst of the machines of war in this event, yet is probably the one that most players have leveled. I cannot recommend that you use 3 munitions to deploy the summon, as it's an exorbitant expense for relatively small gain. Once you go to the last few waves, even a maxed Galatian is having trouble one-shotting your enemies. A high-level secondary can help you a lot, but it is kind of hard to engineer situations where you manage to kill more than one unit, and sometimes not even that. Tyrith is not as good as Jaeger was the last time we had an Imperial survival. The problem is that her passive is a ranged attack, so even when the enemy is in melee, this passive does not get the extra hits from the melee hits power-up. Without those extra hits, the passive struggles to kill most enemies. Vindicta is the final character I have in this tier. Her area of effect is awesome, but I found it hard to keep her alive. You probably have to run her with Isabella, and that eats up 2 out of your 4 deployment slots in a survival that is very mech heavy. I haven't gone over the other characters here. I would generally try and avoid them. If you have a specific question, leave it in the comment section and I'll try and get to it. That's it for the overview. Thanks as always to my Patreons and YouTube members for their support, and best of luck in this event. Bye for now.